Instead of drawing a state in 2014, Carol decided that she wanted to visit New York. So from June 7th to June 14th, we traveled to New York. Most of our trips have started with 10 best things to do in, and then fill in the location. So when I Googled the 10 best things to do in New York, I found that most of the activities that we thought would be fun were in New York City. While traveling, I had been pushing Carol to experience the local culture as best as we could in our week. We had been limiting our trips to 1 week because Carol and I were both still working full-time. Anyway, so I told Carol in order to experience the local New York culture, we should ride the subway at least once. As I started to plan our trip, I found that it would cost us $50 for Carol and I to take a taxi from the airport to our motel in Manhattan, or $5 for the two of us to take the subway. This is a big difference. Being from the Midwest, Carol had ridden a city bus once in her lifetime. I never had, and neither of us had ever ridden a subway. But I told Carol if it seemed unsafe, we could always get back off the subway and then would take a taxi to our destination. Although Carol was hesitant, I convinced her to let me try it. Here is an attempt to explain our ride from LaGuardia to our motel in Manhattan. Working backwards, I found that our motel's address in Chinatown was on Chrystie Street in Manhattan, just off Canal Street. By looking at the map, I could see that a green line comes from the top of the map. Following this up the map, I can see that the green line services subway lines 4, 5, and 6. Continuing to follow this green line up the map, I eventually see where 125th Street, subway 4, 5, and 6, and M60 bus route all intersect. This is important because now I know that if I follow the M60 back to the airport, I can see that I can board the M60 bus at the airport and ride to 125th Street, then catch subway 4, 5, or 6 that will take us to Canal Street, and from there it will be a short walk to our motel. So when we arrived at LaGuardia Airport, I purchased this Metro card in the vending machine for $1, and then I loaded it with 20 more rides. We were able to share one card, and if we went directly from one bus or subway route to another bus or subway, it was considered a transfer, so meaning there was no more charge for the card. I had downloaded a copy of the bus and subway map to my phone so that when we departed from the airport on the bus, I was able to track the street sign to make sure that we got off at the right stop to be able to transfer to the correct subway. Our first ride on the bus, the transfer, and then the first ride on a subway went flawlessly, and then it was a short walk to our motel. I was convinced that we wouldn't have problems getting around on the subway. We stayed in Chinatown for 2 nights. An estimated 90 to 100,000 people live in Chinatown. One of the first things we noticed in Chinatown was that almost no one accepts credit cards. Everything is expected to be paid in cash. While walking around in Chinatown the first evening, we saw a fish market a block from our motel. Across the street from our motel was a 4-block-long park, split into sections where the local residents had a place to sit and talk, play games, and exercise. This was a walking track and playground. This was a play area for the younger kids. People were also playing cards and handball. There was even an area for playing bicycle polo. Just north of Chinatown is an area called Little Italy.
You gotta take snow.
The Statue of Liberty sits on Liberty Island. On June 8th, we took a bus to Battery Park on the south end of Manhattan, and then rode a boat over to Liberty Island. The Statue of Liberty was a gift from France. It was dedicated by President Grover Cleveland in 1886. The Statue of Liberty is 151 feet 11 inches tall to the top of the torch. The cement pedestal that the statue sits on is 153 feet 7 inches, for a combined height of 305 feet 6 inches. The hammered copper plates that make up the statue are reinforced by an iron framework inside. The statue was closed in 1984 for a massive restoration. That iron framework that supports the statue was deteriorating. 2 years later, on July 5, 1986, the statue was reopened to the public. This was a picture of the New York City skyline from the Statue of Liberty. After touring the Statue of Liberty, we took another short ride to Ellis Island, where millions of immigrants were processed through between 1892 and 1924. This is a picture of Ellis Island from Liberty Island with tall buildings in the background. Most of the subway system in New York City is underground, but while they were digging these tunnels, they had to put the dirt somewhere. The answer was to haul it over to Ellis Island and dump it. The result is that Ellis Island doubled in size. The red line in this picture shows the results of this expansion. On June 9th, Carol and I checked out of our motel in Chinatown and took a short walk to a travel agency where we boarded a tour bus for a 7-hour bus ride to Niagara Falls. In hindsight, I should not have booked a bus tour through a travel agency in Chinatown. 95% of the people on the bus were Chinese. When our Chinese guide with a strong Chinese accent spoke, sometimes you couldn't tell if she was speaking English or Chinese. On the way to Niagara Falls, we stopped for a tour of the Corning, New York glass blowing factory. A skilled glass blower gave us a demonstration of what it takes to create a bowl.
Now we're dropping the temperature in this bubble with compressed air until that glass turns solid. Don does this in preparation to submerge it into our furnace of molten glass and get about 3 times as much right around it so we can make a larger piece. He turns that blowpipe while he's in the furnace to collect the glass, and from this point forward, he'll never stop rotating that pipe, otherwise gravity would cause the glass to run to the ground. Now, as he's going through those steps, that core bubble is absorbing all the fresh heat from the furnace gather, and eventually, in a couple moments, Don will begin to inflate it a little bit larger.
When we finally arrived in Niagara Falls, it was late in the afternoon. We were given an hour and a half to look around and take pictures, and then taken back to our motel for the night. The next morning, we were taken to the Maid of the Mist boat that took us up next to the falls. Here's some of that boat ride. Here is a picture of Carol and I at Niagara Falls. After our tour of Niagara Falls, we boarded the bus and returned to New York City. Back in New York City, a short walk put us back in our previous motel in Chinatown. The next morning, on June 11th, we took a subway north from our motel to the 9/11 Memorial. 2 reflection pools were built on the original footprint of the Twin Towers. The names of each victim were engraved around the north and south pools. Flowers were often left by loved ones. I didn't feel it was right to take pictures of anything inside. After leaving the 9/11 Memorial, we boarded another subway for the Empire State Building. We found that the easiest way to get help in the subway was to open a subway map. People would walk up to you and ask if they could help. This happened several times. We concluded that 9/11 had changed people's attitudes in New York City. It was a pleasant surprise from what we expected. This is the view from the 86th floor of the Empire State Building. There is Central Park in the distance from the Empire State Building. On June 12th, we caught the B subway to Brighton Beach and then walked over to Coney Island. This was a less crowded subway ride than some of the others we had taken. This is the Atlantic Ocean from Brighton Beach. There is Coney Island in the distance. This is Coney Island from the pier. No trip to Coney Island would be complete without a stop at the famous Nathan's Hot Dog Stand. And then we headed back to Manhattan on the D subway. Notice that portion of this route is above ground. It had been planned this way, but the D subway train that we took from Coney Island on the Atlantic Ocean back into Manhattan allowed us to stay on the same train until we were a block from our next destination, Times Square. Much like the rest of New York City, Times Square was a very busy place.
Y después salió.
The president during the 1960s. Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, you do.
We saw the flagpole on top of the one Times Square building where the ball is lowered every year on New Year's Eve. On June 13th, we checked out of our motel in Chinatown and took the number 6 subway north to another motel. With only one night left in New York City before flying home, we wanted to position ourselves for our early morning trip back to the airport. But this was also because we wanted to be close to Central Park, which was our next stop on our list. Central Park was so quiet and peaceful compared to the rest of New York City. We even saw a wedding in progress. Later we saw a dog walker. Now experts of maneuvering in public transportation in New York City, we were able to catch the subway back to 125th Street and then transfer to the eastbound M60 bus early in the morning for the ride back to the airport. This concludes our trip to New York, the 6th state that Carol and I had visited together. As always, we had barely scratched the surface of what state we were visiting in, but had a great time. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to subscribe to be notified of future trips, and if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Thank you.